Good morning, everyone, and welcome to week 5 in facility design. This week, we're going to be taking a look at menu engineering. So kind of a neat story about menu engineering is I first started doing this when I was doing some restaurant consulting. I usually charge like $500 to do exactly what we're going to be doing in class here today, and that is analyzing their menu, breaking down what items have the largest contribution margin, as well as what items are most popular. And really what this does is just give them a great tool for when their seasonal menu changes happen. They're able to really specifically say what kind of changes need to happen and how do I always increase my contribution margin as much as possible. So we'll go through the actual calculations of a menu engineering document. And then in another video after this, I'll go through what is the in-class assignment for this week. So before we start that, a few things that I did want to bring up is that there's other environmental factors outside of money that also have an influence on the menu, one of which is social issues. So social issues are current popular or unpopular trends that have been happening. So if you were to think about a shark fin soup, that is something that generally most populations, and specifically in North America, let's say, would feel against, or an exotic meat like a zebra or a panda or an endangered species. These are all things that could be considered not illegal, but inappropriate. There also are themes that are inappropriate. I don't know if you know of the restaurant brand called Hooters. So it's a highly sexualized environment in the hospitality industry, which is already highly discriminatory towards some females. That is a theme that would be considered inappropriate, although the chains still do exist, and specifically in the United States, but also here in Canada. And there's also some other health and nutritional concerns, and we have spoken about this a little bit with the Healthy Choices Act of 2017, but also health and nutritional concerns when it comes to how is our meat raised? Is it raised through the use of antibiotics and hormones? And the living conditions of those animals. So those are some social issues. In terms of sustainability, food service operations are generally very wasteful. We are large producer amounts of waste. We have large amounts of water, power, and gas required, and we typically have weak recycling programs. Now, we are always trying to do a little bit better. There's a couple different ways in which we can do this. And that could just be, changing lighting out to LED or turning on your equipment later on in the day in your kitchen, having late night menus that only use a couple pieces of those pieces of equipment. But there's also sustainability issues when it comes to what kind of food we're serving. So such as a sustainable fish or seafood program, as well as some of the produce. Is it organic, or are we buying lemons from South America when we have lemons growing currently not that far away from us? So it's one of those things that we always have to take a look at. And here's an example of one of those things called Feast On. So this is a certification that is Ontario-based only, and it's basically about 60% of your menu has to be sourced from local farms. So if you go to Feast On of Ontario, you'll see all the different restaurants that it applies to right now. And it's just one small thing that we're slowly starting to incorporate when we take a look at menus. A couple things that we also have to understand is the ethnicity of our populations. So what current ethnicities are present in the populations, therefore what kind of food brands seem to do better, as well as we have some weather concerns and seasonality that we also have to keep in mind. So when it comes to weather concerns, and we talk about this already in facility design, when you open a door to the outside and you have that warm air or cold air coming in, it can often upset some of your customers. It could be either too hot or too cold. And that's also where we have talked about positive air pressure and negative air pressure. And then finally, before we get into menu engineering, is that there is some legislation and legal concerns. So by law in Ontario, there's a few things that you must do. So one is truth in menu laws require that the menu accurately describe what food is actually being served. So you cannot say it's a 7-ounce filet when it's a strip loin. You can't say this lamb was raised in Ontario when it was not. Fresh to order, but then you buy it frozen. These are things that you cannot do by law. As well as truth in advertising. So as we've seen in last class, we did take a look at the McDonald's Big Mac as an example, and then what you actually get. So the way that it's supposed to be presented and the way that it is actually presented, and they're often not the same. So we have to have a real representation of what the product is. Misleading information is illegal. Smart Serve. So Smart Serve and all restaurants that are currently serving alcohol, there is an alcohol limit. And there will be, and I don't know exactly how this is going to work, but there will be a marijuana and food equivalency of Smart Serve. So basically right now, anyone that is over 18 can serve alcohol, but they must have their Smart Serve license. And there are certain limited hours in which that you can now serve alcohol. So menu engineering. It is a technique for analyzing menu sales. And what we really look at are two major evaluation items, which is popularity and contribution to bottom line dollars. I will refer to this as contribution margin, or CM, and popularity might be referred to as MM, which is menu mix, or basically, what do you sell the most of? What do you sell the least of? So it's best explained by example. So what we are looking at here is our menu engineering worksheet. And just briefly, we're looking at 5 different entrees. So when it comes to menu engineering, a couple things you have to remember is that you are doing comparative analysis of items on your menu. What you cannot do is compare entrees with desserts. So every category will be compared against itself. You cannot have several different categories being compared. So you wouldn't bring in all your appetizers, your entrees, your sandwiches, your pizzas on a single form, but rather you do separate ones for each of those. What you have here is on the B column is the number that were sold. We have the menu mix, which is the popularity. So this would be represented as a percentage. The food cost and the sales price. Now these have to be supplied in advance for us to be able to complete this. Those are the two pieces of data that we do need. And then we have item CM. So item CM is going to be the individual item's contribution margin, which is the sales price minus the food cost. Then we'll have full menu cost, menu revenue, menu CM. And what we'll be doing in these 3 columns, and I'll show you in advance later, is that what we're going to be doing is multiplying how many units we sold times the food cost will give us our menu cost. How many items we sold times sales price will give us our menu revenue, and number sold times the item CM, which is yet to be determined, is menu CM. Once we have all those, we can total them up, and then we can figure out how do we compare, and it's best used through example. So once we get all of those numbers I just spoke about, then we're going to classify items, and there's 4 different classifications that we look at. The first one being a plow horse. So a plow horse are items that are relatively popular, but they have a very low contribution margin. We sell a lot of them, but we don't make a lot of money. Stars are considered both highly popular as well as a great contribution margin. Everybody wants to be a star. All of our items, we want to be a star. And usually we do not touch these. Whatever is happening, leave it alone. It's working well for you. Puzzles are items that are not popular, but they have a very high contribution margin. So it could be that bottle of wine that's very expensive. It could be that very high-end, protein dish that not a lot of people order because it's quite expensive, but you make a lot of money when they do. So we do have some work to do on those. And then you have dogs. So they're both unpopular and they have low contribution margins. These typically are the ones that we spend our time focusing on or we want to fix. Now, just to give you an idea that these are the law of averages, which means that you always will have plow horses, stars, puzzles, and dogs. You're always going to have bottom performers, and even if you remove the bottom performers, they will be replaced by another bottom performer. Okay, so not every item can be your most popular, nor can every item be the most profitable. So what you want to do at the end of this, if you are an actual restaurant owner, food service operator, you want your dogs to be there for a reason. Yes, they don't make us a lot of money. Yes, there's not a huge contribution margin, but we keep them because blank. And that's for you to decide. This is just a visual method to display. So the stars on the top right, dogs on the top left, plow horses, and puzzles. 1 second. Now, I have now probably about 15 or 20 slides with all of the different worksheet calculations. But again, I think it's the best way of going through this is to show you how to do it using an Excel sheet. But as you can see here, every single calculation that you'll be doing will actually tell you how to do it, how to find the percentage, and kind of give you the answer. Right? So each of these will go through each single column, have all the calculations for you, talk to you about what it means, and then we'll tell you what the answers are. But what I'm going to do is I'll pull up the slide and walk you through it. Okay, so this is the Excel sheet. This is also located under your weekly learning. So what you'll be able to do here is that you'll be able to go through and complete all these. And I'll teach you a little bit of Excel because I feel like that's important as well. So Excel, most of you probably use, or I hope you have used. It's a very basic grid pattern going from A to Z and 1 to unlimited. Essentially what we're doing here is that I've put in exactly that same thing that we were looking at in the PowerPoint. But what we're going to do is that we'll create formulas to do all of this very quickly. So the first things we'll do is we're going to calculate N. So N is the total of all of these items. That's it. So to do any kind of calculation or formula, you're going to hit the equal sign. Now I want to add all of these up. So I can do it a couple easy ways. I can just click on each one, hit the plus sign, and add them up this way. That works. And then press enter when I'm done. I could have typed in all those numbers as well, but that's very time consuming. And there's also something called a sum function. So what you're doing is that you're just adding up a strand of numbers up, and they're all in a row. I can just say equals sum and open bracket. So equals starts the formula. I type in sum, and I just click and drag what I want to be added up, and press enter. So it's 575. So it's great. Now that's the only total I'm going to require from you. I don't need totals all the way over here. Just ignore those, and I will actually just block those out for you. Okay. Next one is menu mix. So the menu mix is a percentage, and what we want to know is 72 chickens were sold out of a 575. How much was that? So I'm going to say 72 divided by, so B4 divided by B9. So right now, this is showing as 0.12521739. But essentially what I want to do is format this whole column so it is a percentage. So right up here, very easy, you can see general. I can format it as a percentage, and I typically like to give it 2 decimals, just like you do with money. You know, you always have 2 decimals when it comes to money, and you should with percentages as well. Now, same thing, I can go through, complete the same process. And it knows, it does the math for me. B6, B7, and finally B8 divided by B9. There we go. Now, if I wanted to find out that all of those should equal 100, like 100%, so I can always just do this, and sure enough, it equals 100%. I just added that up quickly, just all those 5 numbers, just to ensure I double check my math. Okay, so next column. So here we have $14.45 is the sales price. Food cost is $4.65. The item CM is what the contribution margin is. So what we're going to be doing here is we're going to be taking the sales price minus the food cost. E4 minus D4. Now you see it's $9.80. Now here's where things are going to get a little easier. Instead of going through each individual cell and redoing all the math, what you can do is one of two things. So I know for the next couple columns, it's going to be the same formula. It's going to be E minus D. So I can right click, copy, and then paste, and it'll do all the math for me. And if I click on each of these individual cells, it'll tell me E4 minus D4, E5 minus D5, E6 minus D6, so on and so on. It works great. Now that's one way I can do it. Even easier is that I can go straight down, and I can just, on the bottom right hand corner, what I can do is I can pull that right down. So you see it when I hover it, it goes into this little crosshair. So what you're going to do there is click and pull down, and that's where that map will come from. So right here, anywhere from $9.55 I'm making up to $15.25. So you can see the bottom performer and the top performer. Menu cost. So as I mentioned before, like very similar, these are all going to be somewhat the same. So menu cost is going to be 72 times the food cost. And menu revenue is going to be 72 times the sales price. How much money do we make by selling them? And then 72 times the contribution margin. How much menu contribution do we make from selling 72 of those? Same thing. I can just pull this down for all the next 5. Away we go. And it's giving us some numbers. Now, what you're doing here is, so if you get all of these number signs, all that means is it doesn't have enough room to show. I just need to give it a little bit more room. So that's it. So if it's too narrow of a column, you just got to open it up and away you go. Now we're going to go down here. So we're going to do the total menu cost, the total menu revenues, the total menu CM, contribution margin. Just like we did before, it's a sum function of all of the column above. And because this is the sum of these 5 up here, and these 2 are the same, it's just a sum function of these 5 up here, I can also copy and pull this one to the right. It'll tell me all of my amounts. So I sold almost $10,000 in food. It cost me $3,200, and I got to keep $6,700 of it, more or less. Additional calculations. Food cost. So food cost is easy. It is the cost divided by the revenue as a percentage. So that's showing 0.32. Again, I can just hit this little percentage, give it a couple decimals, and now we're looking at 32.53% for our food cost. Easy peasy. The next 2 ones are how we are going to actually determine if these menu items are plow horses, dogs, stars, or puzzles. So the first one is the average menu mix. Now this formula, and it is in your PowerPoint as well, this formula is 1 divided by the number of items that we are comparing. Okay, so we have 5 items, 1 divided by 5. That's it. It's that simple. And you want to show it again as a percentage, so it's 20%. Average CM is all of the total menu CM divided by the amount of items we had to sell to make that money. So on this whole menu right here, we sold 575 items. We made $6,679 off it. So each individual item made us $11.62. And that's good information to know, because if that's our average, then I say, okay, next week I think we'll sell 650. Then I can tell you next week I'm going to assume that we're going to make $7,550. That gives me some budgetary information that I can now use to pay my labor and my leasing and my bills and all that kind of stuff myself. Just good information to know. You can also find the average check as well by just dividing this by that 575. Lots of information you can pull from this. Okay, but now that we know these 2 numbers, 1162 and 20%. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go up here and we're going to figure out what is our CM category. And what I want you to do here is you're either going to put an H for high or an L for low. You can type high, you can type low, that's fine too, but an H for high and an L for low. And what we are going to compare is contribution margin. So the item contribution margin versus the average. If the item contribution margin is lower than the average, we put an L in there. If it's higher, like 1360 is higher than 1162, we put an H. That's it. 1525 is higher than 1162, 1025 is lower, 955 is lower. Easy. Menu mix category, similar style of formula, but instead we're going to use our menu mix here, which is popularity, and the average of 20%. So 12 is lower, anything over 20 is higher. So there we go. So now we've determined that the easiest one to understand is that dogs are low on both and stars are high on both. So we know that this one is a dog and we know that this one is a star. So something that is high in contribution margin but low in popularity is called a puzzle. And now these two here would be your plow. I'm just going to put plow. Okay, so that is menu engineering basically done right there. We've looked through the menu. We've been through this. We've been able to identify which ones are the worst performing, which two need some work. So these we need to figure out how we make more money. This one we need to figure out how we make it more popular. And then this star here, the steak, we're just going to leave alone because it's already good. So that's menu mix. So I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint here just for a minute and go through some of what we do now. Okay. So let me move this down. So now that we've gone through each particular one, we now have to understand what we think we should do. So you know what each menu is classified as, you understand what the popularity, the contribution margin, we have good information. So first one is star. Star's good. You make good money. It sells well. You shouldn't really touch these too much. Plow horse. So these are unprofitable but popular. So if something is unprofitable, we need to figure out how we make more money. Now the easiest thing is just to increase the price. Now, if you increase the price too much, you will also sell less of them, right? Something costs more, people buy less. These are obviously priced very well to sell a lot of. So if you increase the price enough, you might be able to get it to that star classification a little bit better. But if you charge too much, then you're just going to turn a plow horse into a puzzle where you're making good money, but you're not selling enough. So it's just about enough. Alternatively, you can also decrease the portion size. So let's say if it was a shrimp cocktail and you were selling 6 shrimps in a dish, maybe you go 5. Now you still charge the same price, but it's a lower cost. Or if you can maybe just find a different provider or supplier of the actual food that is cheaper, that might make sense as well. Popular also means that the description and the placement on the menu are working, so generally you don't want to change it too much. Now puzzles are profitable, but they're unpopular. So this item you must try to work on increasing its popularity. We already make good money. So what you could do is change the placement on the menu. Put it to those top couple lists, or you emphasize it with some sort of shading, boxing, change the descriptors, change the name of it, something for you to get this thing selling more. You may also just change the price. So it's just not enough to change the CM, just enough not to change the contribution too much. So you still want to make good money off it, but let's say if you reduce something $1, and I can actually refer back to that sheet. So puzzle. So here we're making $15.25. Now if I change this to say $19.50, then we're still making $12.25. It's still above the average contribution margin, which would still be good, but we might sell a lot more of them because I've now dropped underneath that $20 range. And if something is over $20, they might just say, I don't know if that's worth it. It's just every time you go into the next go from 20 to 30 or 30 to 40, you have a hesitation to buy. So that might do it right there. And you're still making more money. You are sacrificing that you're not selling as many, but it's still a very profitable item. And then, of course, you can do verbal features or go on chalkboards to the restaurant, so market it more. And then finally is dogs. So dogs are both unprofitable. They're also unpopular. Generally, when there is a menu, you don't need to remove them from your menu, but when there is a menu change or you're trying to bring new things onto the menu, these will be the ones that you might look at to go. You might be able to make them profitable, or if there's a reason to continue to sell them, that's also okay. So if just because something isn't popular or making you a lot of money doesn't mean that you should get rid of them. Okay, so this also goes back to our signature, our conversation about signature items, where sometimes signature items just don't make you a whole lot of money, but you can't get rid of them because people expect it to be there. So if it's a talking point, people come in for your drink, the Caesar, because it has like a little mini hamburger and a bunch of skewered asparagus and cheese and a pepperette and a pepperoncini and a lime lemon, all these garnishes. It's like this major talking point, and people take pictures and put it on social media. Okay, you don't make a lot of money off it, but it pays for marketing for it by itself. So that might be worth it. It reinforces the concept. You're an Italian restaurant. You're not getting rid of the chicken parmesan or the veal parmesan, even though it might not sell a lot or is very popular or it makes you a lot of money. It could be used as a decoy item. So it's very expensive, but it also makes the other items look better or look more reasonable. It's your signature item. There's a customer expectation or preference. You have regulars that always come in and they always order it, and they're your Sunday crew, and you just don't want to get rid of it or make them upset. Or you have all the ingredients. So you're already buying all of those ingredients for that meal. It's not really that difficult to maintain it. You're not or retrain a new item. It can stay because you already have all of the stuff. There's no wastage. And it just makes sense. So it doesn't cost you anything else. So finally, as you create your menu, you will not know what are going to be dogs, stars, or plow horses until you have records of sales. So financial history is your best tool when you do a menu design. As far as breaking down the recipe and costing it out, you should always compare with other similar restaurants and determining industry averages for specific categories. So as an example, there are homogeneous products that have somewhat of a, an expectation of cost. So if I were to go in and order, I'll use quick service because everyone knows it. If I go in and order a number 3 on a McDonald's, combo meal, I expect to spend between $9 and $12. And if it's over that, it seems a little bit too much. If it's under that, it seems like a great deal. Everyone just has that homogeneous idea of what things should kind of cost. Pound of wings, chicken fingers, a pop, a glass of wine, or beer. These are all things that we are ordered very commonly. So you just got to be, if there is a higher price, you have to make sure that those items justify it. So specific individual ingredients or a higher caliber of food or a different style of service could justify those higher prices. Next is the assignment. I'm going to do another video and I will post it up under the assignments. And this is going to go through an Excel sheet that's a little bit more intensive than the one that we looked at. And I'll give you a little brief view of it here. So please watch this. I won't go through all the calculations because you'll know that by watching this video. But what I will do is go through the secondary and third part that will be requiring you to answer these and submit them to me. Okay? So jump over to assignments and tests, and I'll see you over there.